Once again, Christian greetings to all our valued listeners and viewers throughout the whole world, even more particularly to all Shepherd's Rod believers, and most especially to our beloved brothers and sisters in the United States of America. Special greetings to our brethren in Colorado, in Georgia, in Kansas, in Missouri, in Texas, in Chicago, Illinois, in Arkansas, in California, in New York, Pennsylvania, Canada, Fiji Island, Mexico, Spain, Africa, Zambia, Kenya, Pakistan, to the United Kingdom, and also to our brethren in Australia, and our brethren in Malaysia, and to the rest of the 144,000 living saints scattered abroad. Greetings. May the good Lord bless you, my dear brothers and sisters. This is our special episode number 42 as the last final warning message just prior to the close of provision. And I will not be weary to remind us this admonition in 7 Symbolic Code, 7 to 12, page 19, saying, "We have learned much, and no doubt there is much for us to learn. It is the follow-on and the go-through spirit that will finally land the remnant without fault on the heavenly Mount Zion. My conclusion is that we should give up no scripture truth, but that our false applications and interpretations of scripture and consequent false ideas of order and propriety should be given up as fast as possible." The Review and Herald, May 29, 1860. So, to repeat again, that statement, false applications, is pointing to the expectation of the prophet. And that's what it means by cow's dung. So let's read again in 1 SR 124. The prophet was told that he should not use wood or coal to bake the cakes upon, but that he should use dung that cometh out of a man. To Ezekiel it was too repulsive, and he pleaded to be excused. The Lord made an allowance, not by compulsion, but for Ezekiel's sake only, by telling Ezekiel to bake it with cow's dung. So, the statement for Ezekiel's sake, meaning for the good of the prophet, God allowed the false expectation. And to repeat again, in the ceremonial system, cow's dung are included according to Numbers 19 verse 5, Leviticus 16 verse 27, Leviticus 8 verse 17, Leviticus 4 verse 11, and Exodus 29 verse 14. But the dung of the sheep are not included because the sheep represent the Bible. In Isaiah chapter 7, verse 21 and verse 22, the two sheep represent the Bible, the Old and the New Testament, whereas the young cow represent the spirit of prophecy, according to 2TG, number 20, page 24. Although we are familiar with the fact that those prophets in the Old Testament, they have also their own expectation, but their false expectation were not included or were not written in the Holy Canon, whereas the writers of the Scroll of Prophecy, more particularly to Sister White and B.T. Hotep, their false expectation were recorded in their writings. But the prophets who recorded the Bible, they have their own false expectations, but it was not written, it was not included in their writings. So, the illustration on the ceremonial system is perfect. Only cow's dung are included to represent that the spirit of prophecy, there are cow's dung or false expectations of the prophets. And that false expectations is even more directly applied to the sealing of the 144,000. Because both prophets, Sister White and B.T. Hotep, they expected the sealing of the 144,000 occur in their days, and it will be completed in their days. So, the statement, for the prophet's sake, can be easily understood that through such expectation, they have a desire to be among that special company, the saints that will no longer to taste death. Give them more courage and zeal in serving the Lord. So, such false expectation, for their sake, meaning, although it is a false expectation, it leads them to serve God more fully. But of course, in our days, we need now to analyze the scriptural truth. And it is time now for us to give up their false expectation and stick to the scriptural truth. Now, for example, here in tract number 2, on page 48, it says, hence the danger, tract number 2, page 48, hence the danger of the fourth chariot is not of going into Babylon, but rather into Egypt. Tract number 2, page 48. So, it is natural for B.T. Hotep to say that the fourth chariot represents the Seventh-day Adventists because of that false expectation that the sealing of the 144,000 will be fulfilled in his lifetime. But let us stick only to the scriptural truth that concerning the fourth chariot, the danger of that fourth chariot is not of going into Babylon, but rather into Egypt. Now, for example, brothers and sisters, in the type, it is God who encouraged Jacob and his household to go down into Egypt. So I would like to read Genesis 46, verse 2, 3, and 4. And God spake unto Israel, Genesis 46, verse 2, verse 3, and verse 4. And God spake unto Israel in the visions of the night, and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, Here am I. And he said, I am God, the God of thy father. Fear not to go down into Egypt, for I will there make of thee a great nation. I will go down with thee into Egypt, and I will also surely bring thee up again, and Joseph shall put his hand upon thine eyes. Genesis 46, verse 2, 3, and 4. Now, the shepherd's rod made it so plain. And 1 SR page 76, it says, the beginning of this denomination was typified by Israel's entrance into Egypt, as previously explained. We shall now consider the truth of the land of Goshen. Joseph brought Israel into Egypt and gave them the part of the land to dwell in, which was the best land in the country of Egypt. And there Joseph nourished them, their flocks, herds, and cattle, and all they had. See Genesis 45, verse 10. The land of Goshen stands as a symbol of the United States of America, in which the church came into existence. Now, no one would say that when God commanded Jacob to go down into Egypt, brothers and sisters, God is sending his people into a dangerous ground, which typifying the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So the statement, the danger of the fourth chariot is going into Egypt, can be easily understood that that statement must be applied at the time when God commanded his people to depart from Egypt. Because the danger is disobedience to the word of God. When God said to Jacob that go down into Egypt, there is no danger there because Jacob and his household only followed the divine instruction. And I would like to read this reading, and one is our page 115 and 116. It says, the experiences of the children of Israel in Egypt was a photograph of our denomination. Thus, their experience is being reproduced in every particular with these people. You see, brothers and sisters, in every particular with these people. 1 SR 115 and 116. So, the experience of the children of Israel in Egypt was a photograph of our denomination. So, the Seventh-day Adventist Church typifying God's people while they were in Egypt. And it is God who commanded his people to go down into Egypt. So, when we study the writings of Sister White and B.T. Hotep, it is high time now to distinctly separate their false expectations and the scriptural truth. Now, the scriptural truth that we need to focus our attention is that predicted event to depart from Egypt, to get out from Egypt. And the shepherd's rod plainly told us in 2SR 275, it says, "But the perfect fulfillment of the prophetic period of Abraham in its antitype is yet in the future, going out of Egypt." 2SR page 275. Now, that predicted event must be fulfilled on its finality to the 144,000 living saints. So, the experience of Sister White and B.T. Houghton cannot be applied to the fulfillment when Israel went out of Egypt, but rather, together with Jacob, together with Joseph, and all the 12 patriarchs, all of them died in Egypt. So, let us distinctly separate that predicted event. Israel going out of Egypt. Here in 1SR Packet Edition, on page 53, 1SR Packet Edition, page 53, it says, "Having now seen that Israel's going into Egypt is typological, logic rules that so also must be Israel going out of Egypt." 1SR Packet Edition, page 53. So there are two typological events. Israel going into Egypt and Israel going out of Egypt. And we already read 1SR page 76 that that predicted event, the entrance of Egypt, is represented the beginning of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So, those predicted events going out of Egypt cannot be applied in the days of Sister White as well as in the days of B.T. Houghton. Because B.T. Houghton himself says that that predicted event going out of Egypt was still future in his days. Now, brothers and sisters, I would like to read 2TG number 22 on page 19. It says, "The paradox," 2TG 22:19, "the paradox in this prophetic symbolism is with the fourth chariot." So whatever the paradox, it is with the fourth chariot. So we need now to focus to the fourth chariot because the paradox is found in the fourth chariot according to the shepherd's rod. By the way, what does it mean by the word paradox? Let's define the word paradox. Paradox, it is a statement that it seems absurd. It seems self-contradictory statement. But if you will dig deeper, they were in absolute and perfect harmony. Or there is a precious truths that had been buried beneath the surface if we are talking about paradox. For example, I would like to read tract number 14 on page 18. Tract number 14, page 18, it says, "The fact, though, that the church, as Nahum says, is not only to be relieved from affliction and freed from bondage, but is also to be sentenced to death." Nahum 1 verse 14. Tract number 14, page 18. It says, "The fact, though, that the church, as Nahum says, is not only to be relieved from affliction and freed from bondage, but is also to be sentenced to death." Nahum 1 verse 14. Creates a paradox. You see, brothers and sisters, it says, creates a paradox. How could it be that the book of Nahum saying that Judah will be delivered, and on the other hand, it says, Judah will be sentenced to death? Creates a paradox. But if you will dig deeper, it shows that there are two groups of people bearing the title Judah. The other one is to be delivered. The other is to be sentenced to death. So, now let's go back to 2TG 22 on page 19. It says, "The paradox in this prophetic symbolism is with the fourth chariot." So the paradox in Zechariah chapter 6 is found on the fourth chariot. Then it says, I would like to focus the statement, "Inspiration obviously is forewarning someone of something very serious that is taking place at this particular time." Now, I would like to read again the statement. Inspiration obviously is forewarning someone of something very serious that is taking place at this particular time. Now, brothers and sisters, to repeat again, the particular time mentioned in that reading must be the time when this predicted prophetic event will be fulfilled. Now, I would like to remind again, let us distinctly separate the prophet who predicted the event. For example, in the Old Testament, there are many prophets who predicted the event of the coming of the Messiah. Although each of them, they have their own expectation, but it was not written. But the most important part is that John the Baptist is the prophet that raised by God to announce that the predicted event was already fulfilled, or it is fulfilling in his days, that the Messiah is already come, that the Messiah already arrived. And that is one of the reasons why there was no writings of John the Baptist. Because his work is to announce that those prophets who predict the event is being fulfilled in his days. So, B.D. Hotter is the prophet who predicted Zechariah chapter 6, but he died before the predicted event had been materialized. And of course, he has many false expectations, and it is called the cow's dung. So, now, what we need to do is to focus only to the scriptural truth as admonished by both prophets, Sister White and B.T. Hotep on 7 Symbolic, code 7 to 12, page 19. Now, I would like to read again the statement. In tract number 2, on page 12, it says, "Never has this symbolical prophecy been understood by any people, and never could it have been fulfilled and not been revealed. For then would its truth have been unavailable to the people in the past, but half efficacious to us now. Necessarily then, its fulfillment is yet future, sometime in the latter part of the Christian era." So the prophet himself declared clearly that the fulfillment of Zechariah chapter 6 is yet future. What fulfillment? The fulfillment concerning such paradox. And the paradoxical part is only found on the fourth chariot, according to the voice of inspiration. Now, let's read 2TG. 2TG number 22. So let's read the statement. It says, 2TG 22, page 21. "Plainly, the chariots symbolize the church militant at work between the two Pentecosts. The fourth chariot being the last, it is to be found operating just before the second Pentecost. Since the chariots are led by horses, the horses themselves must symbolize the chariots or church leadership, and the passengers in the chariots must symbolize the laity." So, the passengers in the chariots must symbolize the laity. Now, this is the question. Does the laity, which is the passengers in the chariots, compose of faithful and unfaithful? Or does the laity, which is the passengers in the chariots, are only composed the faithful laity? Who are they? Specifically, the passengers in the chariot. I would like to read first tract number 2. Here in tract number 2, on page, let's read. Tract number 2, on page 44 and page 45. "Where else in all Christendom, save in the Seventh-day Adventist denomination, the Church of the Laodiceans, is to be found the fulfillment of the prophetic church history unfolded in this study. If this startling revelation of present truth, plain and certain, as the conflict itself between good and evil, does not reach the Laodicean heart, then nothing can ever reach it. O brother, sister, be not fooled. If this does not reach your heart now, in time to save you from the evil to come, it will surely overtake you eventually, but then only to destroy, not to save you. So stay no longer with the grizzled horses in Egypt, for to do so will be only to perish there with them, while the bait take the chariot to the promised land." Now, the shepherds had made it so plain that the bay horses take the chariot to the promised land. So, if the entire chariot had been brought to the promised land, then all the passengers within that chariot must be faithful laity, because there was no such indication that some of the passengers in the chariot, they get out from the chariot. But according to the shepherds, what? the bay horses take the chariot to the promised land. And let us continue reading. It says, seeing that the chariot is drawn by both teams, each pulling in a different direction from the other. Obviously, both cannot win out without breaking it in two, thus leaving it ruined and useless. One pair or the other, therefore, must be cut out of the traces. And the fact that the bay, the strong horses, verse 3, margin, are the ones who walk to and fro through the earth, while the grizzled remain in Egypt, shows that the bay alone are to possess the chariot and to take it from Egypt to the promised land. Now, this reading is easy to understand, that the bay horses must be God's servants, by which the divine command given by God to them is to take the chariot out from Egypt, because the appointed time for their deliverance to the promised land has finally arrived. And logically, in reality, it cannot be applied in the days of Jehoshaphat, while he himself declared clearly that that predicted event, going out of Egypt, is still future in his days. Undoubtedly, therefore, the passengers in the chariot must be represented to the 144,000 living saints. Now, brothers and sisters, anciently, when God take out his people from Egyptian bondage, it is a mixed multitude. But in the antitype, it will no longer be a mixed multitude. It will be reversed, because in the type, God take out his people from Egyptian bondage physically, literally, and God wants them to get Egypt out in their lives spiritually in the wilderness. But the result is that they rebel against God and murmured. And that's why here in 1 TG number 7, I would like to read again the statement. 1 TG number 7, page 10 and 11. And in order to salvage the youth, 1 TG number 7, pages 10 and page 11. So it says here, in order to salvage the youth, God had to bury all their murmuring parents except the two faithful, trusting men who protested against the evil report of the other 10 spies. Mark you, every adult that left Egypt except Caleb and Joshua had to be buried before the youth could cross the Jordan. Why? Because though God did take them with ease out of Egypt, he could not get Egypt out of them. 1 TG number 7, page 10 and 11. So, God will no longer employ the same way, but rather, God will no longer take out people from Egyptian bondage physically, literally, with a mixed multitude. But only those who overcome the flesh, who overcome the world, the flesh, and the devil, they will be the only ones that God will take out from Egypt physically. Or in other words, all of them that God saw in their lives, that they voluntarily get out of Egypt spiritually, they will be the only one that God will take out from Egyptian bondage physically and literally. And this is now the very message that we are now proclaiming. So, to repeat again, brothers and sisters, it is only the grizzled horses that perish in Egypt. If you will apply the prophetic event in the days of Jehoshaphat, both the bay horses and the grizzled horses, they died. They died in Egypt. And there was no bay horses that get out from Egypt. So, through the typological truths, I would like to read again that statement in 2SR 267. It says, a great searchlight by the power of the Spirit shining through the types is the only medium that can remove the obstruction and clear the way to an understanding of this and many other mysteries that are considered incomprehensible and that baffle the human mind. So, the great searchlight shining through the types is the only medium that can remove the obstruction. So, by seeing it in the type, then you can immediately discern the statement in 2SR 275 that the perfect fulfillment of God's people going out of Egypt was still future in the days of Jehoshaphat. And remember, the very feast that they observed when God's people left Egypt is the Passover feast. So we need to study closely that Passover feast. And I already read yesterday in JEZREEL letter number 6 on page 4. JEZREEL letter number 6, page 4, it says, the thieves are identified by the fact that they did not sigh and cry for the abominations done in the church, and were therefore left without the mark. How solemn a time have we come to, more solemn than the Passover in Egypt, the type of the message of the judgment for the living, the addition to the third message. Early Writings, page 277. Now, brothers and sisters, to repeat again, we need to be God's real people, logical thinkers, not bait hunters. 2 TG 24:23. All movements are sighing and crying. The Seventh-day Adventist Church, they were sighing and crying to all Sunday-keeping Christians. That is how they evangelize. And according to them, the abominations that they were sighing and crying to the Sunday-keeping Christians are, for example, Sunday, it is an abomination. And that is the reason they were sighing and crying. There are many reformers, not Shepherd's Rod believer, independent ministry, reform movement, international missionary society. All of them were sighing and crying in the mother church. Because according to them, the abomination is breaking the Sabbath, cooking food during the Sabbath, and also violating health reform. And they jealously sigh and cry in the mother church. So, no, it is not just simply sighing and crying. And that is why, here in 1SR page 31, it says, 1SR page 31, speaking of the 144,000, volume 5, page 210 and 211 says, these sighing, crying ones had been holding forth the words of life, a message. So they were holding forth a message of life, or the words of life, a message. And that words of life, that is the present truth. Let's read again, 2 Symbolic Code number 5 and 6. It says here, 2 Symbolic Code number 5 and 6, page 9. As long as you keep wavering on present truth, your sighing and crying will be too feeble and insufficient to place the seal of God in your forehead. 2 Symbolic Code 5 and 6, page 9. So, our wavering of present truth, or the bottom line is that without the present truth, our sighing and crying will be too feeble and insufficient to place the seal of God in our foreheads, according to the Shepherd's Rod. And the mere fact that the subject matter is the 144,000, it must be the present truth under the seventh seal, because the 144,000, they are the saints that will no longer to taste death. And according to 2SR page 202, but the seventh sealing period, being the last, must concern the living. So the only seal that concerns the living is the last seal, the seventh seal. We read several times, brothers and sisters, in 1SR page 28, saying, according to these scriptures, the saints of God in all ages are sealed with present truth. And whatever that present truth is, that is the seal. So, if you will sigh and cry, while in reality, you are not holding the present truth, well, only God knows. Because there are many faithful who sigh and cry, in spite of the fact that the present truth, under the seventh seal, they were not holding. If they were faithful, the only reason that God did not bestow unto them the understanding of the seventh seal, because they are not under the seventh seal. They are the people who are destined to die. But if our destination, we are candidates to be translated to heaven without seeing death. But the mistakes, the failure is in our part because we neglect the present truth, brothers and sisters. Then we will be among that grizzled horses. Now, remember, according to 2TG number 22 on page 26, it says, now is everyone's chance to decide to be either on the one side or on the other, either to reform and be led by the faithful bay horses, or to cling to the self-important grizzled horses and stay by them in the south country, there to perish. This statement cannot be applied in the days of Betty Hotep, because they typify
The same with the 12 patriarchs, all of them died in Egypt. They stay in Egypt. Why? Because there was not yet divine command to leave Egypt. There was not yet divine command to abandon Egypt, to depart from Egypt. So if you will only study seriously Zechariah chapter 6, it must be fulfilled on the very year by which there is a divine command to leave Egypt. And who said that he will not allow God's people to leave Egypt? Pharaoh. So let's read again the statement here in Exodus. Exodus chapter 5, verse 1 and 2. And afterward Moses and Aaron went in and told Pharaoh, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, Let my people go, that they may hold a feast unto me in the wilderness. Notice the feast mentioned is inscribed in singular form. That they may hold a feast unto me in the wilderness. And that feast is the Passover feast. And Pharaoh said, Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice to let Israel go? I know not the Lord, neither will I let Israel go. But for sure, nobody will say that who is the Lord? Because if someone will say that, even Sunday keepers, then it is only an embarrassing on his part. It seems that he is in total ignorance. Who is the Lord? But in this study, it must be pointing to all of them who will oppose the message given by God to abandon Egypt. And with good words and fair speeches, they will hold the chariot, that if possible, the chariot will remain in Egypt. And who are they, the chariot? They are the 144,000 living saints. But prophetically, the bay horses, they have been able to take out the chariot from Egypt to the promised land, according to the Shepherd's Rod publications. Now, in 1SR, here in page 77, it says, Another Pharaoh arose. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which know not Joseph, Exodus 1 verse 8. If the first Pharaoh who exalted Joseph Christ represented the leadership in the days of the apostles, then this new Pharaoh must represent the leadership of this present movement at the time this subject became known. Note, this new Pharaoh knew not Joseph Christ. The meaning is that the leadership of this organization has left following their master, Christ. Volume 5, page 217. So this statement in 1SR, page 77, without any doubt, Pharaoh there represent the General Conference leadership of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. But in 1SR Pocket Edition, on page 45, it says here, by parallel logic, this new Pharaoh, who knew not Joseph, and who sought to destroy the Lord's people, the Israelites, typifies a master enemy, none other than Satan, a false god, the usurper of this world, who knows not Christ and who seek to enslave his people, the Christians, while they are sojourning in antitypical Egypt. So here, brothers and sisters, the bottom line is Satan, meaning all of them who want God's people to stay in Egypt when the divine command given by God abandon Egypt, they must be represented by Pharaoh, the instruments of Satan, the instruments of the devil. Now here in 2SR, page 200, let's read again. 2SR, page 264 and 265, it says, My brethren, I beg of you, hear the voice of the good shepherd. Awake, awake, put on thy strength, O Zion. Put on thy beautiful garments, O Jerusalem, the holy city. For henceforth, from now on, there shall no more come unto thee the uncircumcised and the unclean. Shake thyself from the dust. Arise and sit on thy throne, O Jerusalem. Loose thyself from the bands of thy neck, O captive daughter of Zion. Isaiah 52, verse 1 and 2. Now, we read several times, according to 2 Symbolic Code 9, page 9, that the antitypical Zion in Isaiah 52 is the 144,000. So let's read again. 2 Symbolic Code number 9, page 9. Therefore, the call in the antitype, awake, awake, put on the strength of Zion, put on the beautiful garments of Jerusalem, is to the 144,000. And who are they to call them to awake? It is the 11th-hour servants. Now, let us read again, 2TG number 43, pages 11 and page 12. So it says here, Moreover, since the announcement of the separation of the saints from the sinners originates with the 11th hour servants, and since they are to cry aloud and say, Awake, awake, put on the strength of Zion, put on the beautiful garments of Jerusalem, the holy city, for henceforth they shall no more come unto thee, the uncircumcised and the unclean, Isaiah 52 verse 1. And also to say, Behold upon the mountains the feet of him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace. O Judah, keep thy solemn feast, perform thy vows, for the wicked shall no more pass through thee, he is utterly cut off. Nahum 1 verse 15. It follows that without the 11th hour message and servants, the church, Zion, would be left sleeping forever, never to behold the feet of him who brings these good tidings, of him who publishes peace, and never to put on her beautiful garments, never to be fitted for the kingdom. 2TG 43, pages 11 and page 12. Now, brothers and sisters, look at the statement. Who are they that the message are directly addressed? To the church, Zion, to the 144,000 living saints. Therefore, this message must be proclaimed during probationary time. Because the shepherds are declared clearly in tract number 1. Let's read tract number 1 on page 26. It says, This rousing alarm must sound before probation closes, for it could do no good afterwards. Indeed, could be but a mockery then. Neither could it apply to the time of the loud cry, for the church is not then asleep and without the beautiful garments. So, Isaiah 52, verse 1 and 2, as well as Nahum 1, verse 15, brethren, must be sound before probation closes to the church. As a matter of fact, the shepherds had called it the Passover seal. Now, I would like to read 7 Symbolic Code 7 to 12, page 21. 7 Symbolic Code 7 to 12, page 21. So this is the statement given by the shepherds. It says, It is the antitypical Passover seal, the blood on the doorpost today. So I would like to read again. It is the antitypical Passover seal, the blood on the doorpost today. So, what kind of seal? Antitypical Passover seal. So we need now to study closely that antitypical Passover, brothers and sisters. And this is the very message that we are now sounding to the entire 144,000 living saints. And according to this reading, let us go back again to SR 265. It says, As these words are so plain, to SR 265, as these words are so plain, how can we doubt or misconstrue their meaning? It must be that the church of God is asleep in the dust. Thy God is calling thee, O Zion, God church. And of course, that is pointing to the 144,000 because the foolish virgins, they will not respond to this call. The only object on earth upon which he bestows his supreme regard is in captivity. She is bound by her neck to men of good words and fair speeches. How does God's people have been illustrated in Egyptian bondage? By good words and fair speeches. That statement, good words and fair speeches, brothers and sisters, will be seen literally this year. We will show to you all the evidences and all the proofs that we are now on the very year by which God is now sending a message to all the 144,000 living saints that we need to prepare for our departure in the land of Egypt. And that departure will be fulfilled this very year, the year 2021. Although our final deliverance would be on September 22, 2022. On that midnight deliverance, when God's people will be delivered and brought to that literal, physical, premillennial kingdom. So, brothers and sisters, to repeat again, we need now to restudy again Zechariah chapter 6. And we need to understand clearly who are they, the grizzled horses, and who are they, the bay horses. Let us distinctly separate the grizzled horses and the bay horses in the days of Jehovah. Because both of them, the bay horses and the grizzled horses, were already lying unconscious in their graves. So, we are now talking about the generation in which we are living in. And who are they? Particularly, does the grizzled horses directly address, and as well as the bay horses. But 100%, the chariot, the passengers in the chariot, the focal point, the particular object in view, are the 144,000 living saints to be delivered and brought to the promised land, to God's kingdom, by which God will no longer deliver people in a mixed multitude, but only those who are faithful, those who have proven in their lives that they completely abandon Egypt spiritually. And this is the very message, brothers and sisters, that only those who will participate this coming antitypical Passover will be the one to be a part of that antitypical Exodus. So we'll continue this subject on our next episode. May the good Lord bless you and have a beautiful, wonderful evening.